Hello, today I'm going to talk about the bolt mod and why you should never do it. Before you say, why did I damage a console, this came from a console that was completely screwed up by an idiot, and I had already taken the CPU, the south bridge, and most of the other working parts to fix other systems. So I was getting ready to junk the board, but I decided to cut it off for this demo. Now, you'll notice, obviously in the center, the dies touch the heatsink with thermal paste. That's where the main contact is made. If we look on the four corners, you'll see that there is this peg, which is screwed into the heatsink. But you'll notice a gap. You can see on all four pegs, there's a gap in between that peg and the board. And what I can do is I can push at the board, and you can see I can close the gap. Now, and I can also push away. So you can see that the board is not fixed to these pegs at all, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Now if we go to the bottom, you can see that the X clamp grabs onto the four pegs and it pushes in the center. It pushes right below where the GPU is, and it keeps the GPU and EDRAM dies pushed against the heatsink. Now some people say this is to keep the heatsink pushed against the dies, but no, it's not true. The dies get pushed against the heatsink. Why? So I'll tell you. These four holes, there will go black screws that connect into the metal chassis of the Xbox. And this will fix the heatsink in place. Once you screw that in, the heatsink cannot move. So since this is connected to the chassis and screwed down, when the board flexes slightly, there needs to be the ability for it to move so that there is not force due to that flexing tendency in some location. So since there is the ability for the four corners to very slightly move, such flexing does not cause any problems. And it's completely normal. Alright, you can see I've got the four screws in. I'll go ahead and turn this around. Okay. Here you can see now it's attached, and you'll notice I am not able to move the heatsink at all. The heatsink is sturdy with the cage. It cannot be moved at all. Okay? Now, as heat is produced by the chip and the board warms up, it will very slightly flex. And this is normal, and most materials flex a little bit when they are heated or even cooled. And that's very normal. So what happens is, as the board slightly flexes, you can see that the board is allowed to move very slightly, okay? And the job of the X clamp is to keep the center where the dies are pushed against the heatsink so that it can cool properly. And this is good. Okay, I've now got the bolt kit on. I'm gonna go ahead and show now the problem. So this is a fairly standard kit. And it matches a lot of the ones that are sold commercially. The first problem is, as you can see, there is nothing supporting the center. So what's happening is the heatsink is now secured to the sides, these corners. And what that means is that the heatsink is, these screws are now pulling the edges of the board towards the heatsink. They're not pushing on the GPU at all. So the only reason that the GPU has contact is because these corners here are being forced towards the heatsink, and you'll notice it's a little bit hard to see on camera, but you'll notice that the board is beginning to get a little curve. Okay? Hopefully you can see the curve. So what happens is, over time and over heat cycles, these corners continue to bow in towards the heatsink, and the chip begins to come outwards. And what that means is, A, you get worse connectivity with the heatsink, and B, the board slowly starts to warp. And I'm going to show a picture now of what it looks like after a kit like this has been in a console for some time. It's bent! So as you can see, this is really bad. So, please do not install such bolt mod kits onto your console, because it does not cause any repair. All that's happening is you're squeezing a defective underfill, which causes temporarily the chip to work again. but it will just fail and it will just warp your motherboard. There may be some cases where one of the two things occurred. Either you dropped your console or gave it physical shock and there was a damaged solder joint that cracked because of that. Sometimes those kits are basically like a band-aid fix for that issue, but this is very uncommon. The second possibility is you can get very lucky and the compressed underfill doesn't act up after some time, and as long as that remains the case, your board may work. However, again, that is very rare, and the overwhelming majority of consoles with this type of kit installed fail again, and every single one will have warp. I also wanted to point out that a lot of people put this Kapton tape on these caps. And the reason they do that is because with this bolt mod, the board warps so badly that the heat sinks, which are normally far clearer of those caps, will actually start to touch those caps. And for example, these caps filter the CPU V-core. So if that touches the heatsink, which is grounded, well, you get a 0002. So that's about it. Thank you for your time.